My name's Arne. I work for Google on the Chrome developer relations team. And basically what that means is I get to get people excited about using Chrome. I get excited about the web store because I think it's a new type of engagement with the web that we weren't getting before. I think what's possible now is to build on top of that and really engage users and get them involved in using websites more like applications. So doing rich things like editing text, editing images, even editing video or playing games. Hi, my name is Arne. I work for Google in the developer relations team. I work with the Chrome team, so my specialty is basically Chrome apps and extensions and that kind of thing. These are all things that are built using HTML5, JavaScript, CSS, everything. So I kind of get to talk about a lot of different topics, but today I'm mostly going to focus on Chrome, Chrome OS, and the Chrome Web Store. Just some little metadata. My Twitter handle is @Kurrik, K-U-R-R-I-K. I mostly talk about stuff that's related to extensions, extension development in Chrome, usually stuff that you'll find that's new in the browser, so you can follow me if you want and get up to date on all that. So let's kick off the presentation. I know you've all been waiting here for a while and kind of with the rain and everything. So let's cut to the chase. It's 2010. Where's my freaking jetpack, right? We're in the future. I don't have my jetpack. I'm getting angry. Well, this sentiment is kind of one I, at least, am sympathetic to. But I do get to work with one piece of future technology, which is really amazing every day. And that is my incredibly smart and capable, incompetent browser that never lets me down, unless it gives me a sad face crash tab. Anyway, smart browsers. So we are living in 2010, and now we actually have these pieces of technology that are so advanced that we get to do things that we never thought would be possible over the internet. We're no longer limited to rendering only text or text and images or needing a plugin to do anything really interesting. The kinds of capabilities that are possible today are mind-blowing. You know, if I didn't do it every day, I wouldn't believe it myself. So I'm hoping that I'll give you some examples of what is possible in a browser today and what we can do and what you can do as developers to take advantage of that. Here's a controversial little image. This is the HTML5 logo, which if you know anything at all about HTML5, you might think it's a little bit inappropriate because this logo is actually covering a lot of different technologies, CSS3, kind of just a whole bunch of stuff that's maybe not specifically in the HTML5 spec, but it is a great, great symbol to rally around because this is kind of everything that's new in the browser, everything that's kind of exciting and that's being worked on. So we're kind of using this symbol to evangelize and just champion these new features. And what are these new features? Well, I'll cover a few of them. So we have storage and files. This is the first one that I really find amazing, that stuff that you couldn't do in the past with just a browser. So for example, I'm going to follow this link here. And what we have here is an actual terminal that's been written using JavaScript, only JavaScript, that's running in the browser. And I'll show you some stuff that we can do now with the file system. So we have this file system demo, and I'll just list the directory. So what each web app now gets today is a virtual directory, kind of a sandboxed environment where they can store files and write files and read files, just like you would with a normal file system. So for example, here are a couple files that I've uploaded, and I can actually do things like open them. So I'll open my cr48.jpg, and you can actually see that I've opened up an image that was stored in this file system API. This is the JPEG that I put in. And you'll actually see that the way that it's kind of scoped here in my browser, hopefully you can see this, is that it's referred to as a blob. So this is just basically a string of bytes that JavaScript is now able to manipulate. And it's scoped to the domain that the sample is running on. And the file itself is just this serial hash. So the files don't have real file names, at least to your operating system. But to the browser and to the JavaScript that's manipulating them, you can actually work with files directly. So if I look here again, I can delete this, cr48.jpg, ls, I have to scroll. you see that's no longer there. And then if I were to actually do something like take this image, which is available on my desktop here, and then, oh, this is going to be tricky. I'm going to drag and drop it onto this terminal. You can see that I added the file. I'll just do ls here, and now I'll do open again cr48, create that JPEG. And you can see that I'm manipulating this file and interacting with it by dragging files into and out of the web page. So what does this mean for the potential web apps that you can do with it? This functionality? Well, think about everything that you thought that a web app couldn't do because it didn't have access to local files, right? You can download stuff from the internet. You can allow the user to manipulate stuff, manipulate content, and then you can save it back into your file system and work with that data. So the app itself, the website itself, has this kind of stateful nature now that it used to not really have without a server to store all this data, retrieve it, and you're no longer limited by the network itself. So you can do this all locally without uploading a single byte to the internet. It's very powerful, and it's brand new in Chrome. I actually have to run with a special command line flag in this build of Chrome. But we're hoping that in about 6 weeks, this will be available on stable channel. So hopefully, people will be able to start using it when you start writing for Chrome and do some really, really interesting things. Storage and files. So the next thing I kind of want to talk about is semantics. Obviously, not the sexiest API ever, or portion of the API ever, but probably the part that's most relevant when you say HTML5, right? This is actually in the HTML5 spec. And this is all the new page elements that you can use to mark up your content. These are all stylable, and they're unique, so you can actually start referencing specific elements on your page without having to resort to classes and IDs and so on. And the really interesting thing is that web crawlers like Google, like Bing, I guess, and Yahoo can all go over this content and pull out semantic information from it. Screen readers can go and pull out semantic information about it. They can identify which parts of the page are important and which parts are actually contain information and which parts might be sidebars or headers and footers. So using these types of elements is extremely important because it will let us use mashups and really or let us create mashups that really reference stuff automatically and maybe do a better job of presenting content. For example, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this new, what was it? It takes a web page and reformats it so that it's more readable. Using this kind of markup can actually help create stuff like that, which is really cool and useful for the end user. Multimedia is another big major thing that we couldn't do in the past. So think about it as if where you had an image before, right? You could draw an image into a page and kind of just leave it there. Then JavaScript came along, and you could start manipulating that image. And you had CSS, and you could style it and move it around. And now you can do all sorts of interesting static stuff with images. Well, just like images, we can actually start using JavaScript and CSS to style multimedia, stuff like HTML5 video and audio. So when we have programmatic access to a video, for example, here we can draw it into a canvas. And because Canvas has some amazing drawing routines, we can actually do really cool stuff, like blowing it up. And that's the power that you get when video itself is just a raw data stream that goes into the browser, is made available to JavaScript, and you can pull out that image info and redraw it back onto the canvas and do some really cool stuff. So, for example, this demo, I just love it because it's so fluid and so kind of responsive, and it plays back at full frame rate. And that's because the browser is actually doing all the heavy lifting in the background. You're just kind of hooking up different APIs, calling different routines in JavaScript, but the browser itself is doing direct memory copy of the video buffer frames. So you can actually do these really performant, interesting mashups with video now. So another interesting thing when we're talking about visual stuff is CSS3. And this is a whole wide range of styles and stuff. So personally, my favorite is the ability to do rounded corners on things, box shadows on things, stuff that you used to have to go into Photoshop, maybe do a 9-slice image, and kind of just stretch everything out, make little divs and put backgrounds all over everything. Well, with the new styling methods that you have, you can actually do some really, really interesting stuff. For example, I kind of am partial to this one because it's an AT-AT that's done just using images and then rotating them using CSS transforms and transitions. And it's kind of animating this whole walker like independently using only CSS. It's not using any sort of stuff like Flash or anything. So you can see here, here's all the kind of bounding boxes for all the images that are being used. Just really cool styling stuff, and all done declaratively, just like CSS is. So you kind of just declare how the animation should behave or how the transition should behave, if stuff should be rotated or if it should be translated. And then the browser takes care of that for you. You don't have to do any sort of complicated JavaScript animation routines yourself if you don't want to. In the same vein of cool, sexy stuff, graphics and effects. So we have some 3D stuff, and unfortunately, my machine is running a version of Leopard, so I don't actually get full benefit of this. It's kind of a limitation that we have in Chrome right now, but other browsers are kind of working on hardware acceleration in all sorts of different contexts. But what I will show you is, again, I showed you video frames being drawn into a canvas. Well, here's some of the power that you can do with Canvas. And this is kind of a double demo because this is done entirely using GWT. So it was actually written in Java. But the GWT gets compiled into JavaScript, and it's using Canvas, which is a new kind of HTML API that's available in browsers. And you can actually see that the demo itself is doing some really cool stuff with deforms. It's got this kind of fisheye lens here. You're kind of responding to user input. And it's all just images being drawn and translated and manipulated down to the pixel level. And you can see how fast and responsive it is. It's just kind of really going crazy. And this is all just drawing routines. Things that you would used to need a plugin for, like Flash, is now possible directly in the browser without any sort of plugin. All you need is a browser that recognizes Canvas. So that's a cool one. And if you ever go to html5rocks.com, you can actually try, oh, it's actually enabled for me. So I'm not getting hardware acceleration on here, but this is the 3D stuff that's available. It's called WebGL. It's a variant of GL that's kind of close to what you would program with if you were writing a 3D mobile app. And you can see here that it's not really like a stripped-down browser-only version of GL, right? This is a fairly complex scene. Again, sorry if the image is not very clear for you. But if you go to html5rocks.com, there's a slide deck that you can follow, and that's where this slide is, and it's playing here right in my browser. And ever since we pushed Chrome 9 to stable, we've had WebGL on stable channel for all of our users. Another really cool one is connectivity and networking. So if you weren't aware of some of the new network stuff, I would suggest checking out Kazing because they do some really cool like client-server packaging stuff. But that's all based off of a variety of APIs. The one that's most interesting to me, I think, is the WebSockets API. So if you actually go to rumpitroll, I think it's .com right now, you might actually find me. I see some guests. So I wonder if any of you guys are around here. And what I can actually do is see the interactions that everyone else is doing on this website in real time. So it's cool. You guys are following me around. I hope some of these are you, and not just random strangers. But you get an idea of how this is actually scaling out to all of these clients. We're getting updates in real time. People are kind of swimming around, and it feels very responsive. And the reason that we can build this this kind of many-to-many system is because of WebSockets, which allows your browser to open up a persistent connection to the rest of the server, to the server itself, as opposed to stateless like HTTP connection. And you can pass data two ways, back and forth, up and down that channel. So the server no longer needs to do anything crazy, like if you've ever written an application that uses long polling, maybe, to get updates whenever something changes on the server can directly write out to everything that's connected to it. So programming for the web now, when you're using this API, is less like delivering static assets or delivering stateless kind of content chunks down to the user, you're actually maintaining state on the server, you're passing data down, and you're taking advantage of the fact that that this is all done with very minimal overhead. So you can do things like multiplayer games or online editors where you see one person type or something like that. And it's so much easier now because you used to have to do all sorts of crazy hacks to do it. So for example, if any of you used Wave, rest in peace, the stuff that went into Wave was kind of helped lay the foundation for this, but obviously they had to come up with their own system. They had to do crazy hacks. You don't need to do crazy hacks anymore. So I'll quit out. Have fun with that. That's kind of cool. So another interesting thing is the tendency for web apps to get access to the device itself. And when I talk about the device, it's worth noting that I don't necessarily mean laptops all the time. For example, while I'm using a MacBook, there might be some people out there surfing the web on iPads, phones. We just, I think the Zoom came out today. And basically, these are all very complex machines that have access to a very sophisticated HTML5 smart browser. And so when you get access to this device, you can start doing stuff that start using capabilities that are available on the device itself. So long story short, we can take advantage of some stuff that weren't even really available in computers until recently. So for example, if I wanted to find out where I could find lions near me, I could either type in my name or my location, or I could just let my browser track me. So I can say allow here, and hopefully, yep. So here we go. It's actually fairly accurate. 338 Spear Street. I think we're 345. And there's one 7.4 miles away, so I can rest easy tonight. I just have to keep reloading this page. So we have access to the GPS in cases where there's a GPS in the device itself. Or in the case where there is not, like my laptop, there's all sorts of crazy systems that have been put into place to kind of abstract this away. So for example, it's tracking my either my IP address or something else that it knows where I am. Finally, in terms, well, I won't say finally because there's a lot of stuff coming down the pipe. I think we're working on stuff like inputs where you'll be able to get photos, video directly from camera, audio from a microphone. That's me, sorry. You'll get audio from a microphone, that kind of thing. So that's not there yet. I can't show that yet. But what I can show you is the orientation API, which is in place in Chrome. And what that does is actually, sorry, I can actually use the tilt sensor in my MacBook to actually steer this guy around and, oh, I didn't get it. And play this game using a different sort of, something that wasn't really even possible until, I guess, the Wii came out. Were there any other gaming systems that took advantage of full motion like that till Wii? Nice. Okay, so Sega Mega Drive apparently has Rumba poles. Oh, Tux Racer and ThinkPads too. Okay, well that's cool. So, I mean, that's still stuff that is definitely like a console and a piece of software. And now we can do it on the web using HTML and JavaScript, which personally for me is a lot easier to develop in. So we kind of have this whole system of APIs and all these kind of cool hooks into your machine and everything. And so what do we do with this, right? We have like the standard of web development up until this point was not really suited for this. We didn't have all these features, so we basically wrote sites that were front ends for databases that were very content based. But now we can start thinking about web apps as completely different animals. They're more application-like, and it requires a different kind of thought pattern and approach to things. So if Seth were here, sorry, he was called away on business, he would actually kind of go over here and tell you about all this stuff that our teams kind of come up with in terms of what makes a good web app. What are we looking for when we're talking about next-gen web experiences? And I'll go over just kind of the key points that we had that we came up with together. The first one is tight focus. So we thought that a modern web app would do one thing and do it really well. So no longer are you kind of getting these portals that are like everything rolled into one, or these kinds of experiences where it's just a lot of content put together. Web apps should kind of be in the same vein as a mobile app. Mobile app kind of does one thing. It's very small bit of functionality, and costs a small amount of money usually compared to like a piece of desktop software. And it's very consumable, right? You can use it for a little bit of time, and then move on and do something else. So that's what we thought the pattern would be really good for in terms of these modern web apps. It should take advantage of a big screen. So unlike a web app, but maybe more in vein of like a tablet app or something like that, you have a lot of real estate when you're using a computer. So my laptop is a 15-incher. My workstation, has a big monitor on it. So you have a lot more chance to do stuff than you would with a small phone screen. So at the same time, a modern web app should take advantage of all the different layouts that it can be rendered in. You're not necessarily confined to a small mobile space. But I want to put a caveat on that and say that you still want to keep that simple, tight focus. You just want to expand and take advantage of the entire window that's available to you. There's a rich experience in a modern-day web app. So this is kind of like you're not just sitting there passively consuming. You're interacting with it. You're kind of changing things around in the app. You're engaging with it. You're using some of those inputs. Maybe it has some animation, whatever. Just tactile feedback, audio cues, whatever, just to make you more immersed in using the application. It's visually stunning. Obviously, this is not necessary for a functional app, but it does deliver a rich experience, the kind that you think about when you're using maybe one of those products by that fruit company. You know the one I'm talking about. They do design really well, and I feel like a lot of their software is really elegantly polished. So we're thinking that like kind of modern web apps should really follow that aesthetic. It's really easy to do good design nowadays, and there's a lot of examples to cull from. So we think that modern web apps should really look good and feel good too. And then finally, they should be fast. And this is kind of very important to us at Google. We've done studies and found out that if you speed up an application or a web page by even a few hundred milliseconds, that the amount of user engagement goes up by a dramatic percentage. And that's a really great, interesting statistic. And I feel like a lot of people just kind of gloss over speed. So there's a lot of new technologies that you can use to speed up your pages. You can use the new CSS stylings to remove the amount of images that you need to use, or cut down on the DOM of your page itself. There's all sorts of tags inside of the DOM to load scripts asynchronously so that they get pulled down by the browser in a more efficient way. You can preload assets remotely using kind of preload tags. You can also do things like WebSockets, which have the efficient streaming communication to the server. And you can store data offline using this file API and some other APIs just to make sure that your application is fast and responsive. So there's all sorts of things you can do to make your application fast, and I feel like it's worth it to kind of brush up on those. So we have all this stuff, and I've been talking about it. And so your question, maybe you're thinking, okay, it's great. Like, we've been hearing about these specs for a long time. I mean, some of these are not new, right? They've been around for a while. Is it the future yet? Can we use them in our day-to-day applications? Well, we have a few resources. And when I say by me, it's not like me and Seth, if you were here. It's not me and like all the other Googlers. It's the web community at large. And the first of these, which I personally like, is called caniuse.com. So there's a listing of all of the APIs that I've talked about and then some. And it basically tells you which versions of which browser you can use each feature on. So it's kind of a good roadmap to determine, hey, depending on what I'm targeting, what can I use? There's also HTML5boilerplate.com. This is done by Paul Irish, and I think some other folks too. I just know Paul. But it's basically a very quick ramp up to get a site running using some HTML5 technologies. So he gives you site templates. He gives you some Apache server configurations, a few other technologies now, I believe. And it's just everything in a simple, easy to configure and use package that will let you get a site up and running that lets you take advantage of some of these technologies right away. So I urge you to check that out if you're interested in kind of poking around this stuff without really needing to go and read a whole bunch of spec documents or technical stuff. So I'll kind of diverge from the future stuff and for a second, and then kind of put a question to the audience. Is basically, if you had access to all of the stuff that I was talking about, the demos that I showed you so far, what kind of stuff would you build, right? Like, what kind of experience would you build using the web? You know, don't have to call it out. Just think about it to yourself. I mean, like, what kind of stuff do you envision? And does it look like desktop software? Does it look like mobile software? And what I can tell you is that we have some people who have actually been building stuff with the full confidence and full kind of reliability that all these features are going to be available to them. And these are basically app developers who have been writing for the Chrome Web Store. So I'll show you some examples, and I have screenshots, but I also have the live apps installed. So for example, we have NPR's application here, and hopefully it will load. Yes. So so you can see that the experience of reading the news and playing audio and doing all that stuff is actually very much unlike NPR's standard website, right? Like, you actually have scrolling little bits here. I'm sorry that the resolution is kind of low so that you can't really see it too well. But you have different scrolling areas, different sections. You can click in and actually read content. But it's very much in an appy kind of way. It's something that you'd expect to see on an iPad maybe, rather than something running directly in your browser. So that's one example. The next example is a game that maybe some of you have played, Entanglement, which is a full-on browser game done using HTML5, Canvas. And if you look at this experience, I think it's just stunning to think about how kind of fluid it is, how much it doesn't really feel like a web page at all, right? I'm just kind of playing this game. There's stuff floating around. If I had my speakers turned on, it would be making sounds. And you can see here that it's actually using drawing, doing some crazy overlays, just taking advantage of a lot of different APIs just to give this really immersive, stunning web gaming experience. It's a game. It's a great game. And again, using HTML5 technology. There's Wordico. So if you're a fan of Scrabble, I probably shouldn't even say that. But I don't know how. I'm sure they've got things. I'm sure things are good. But you can actually see here that the app itself, and again, kind of zoom out here, it doesn't look like a website. It's running in my browser. It's using all this stuff, but it's not using Flash. You know, it's just laid out HTML, and you can go and play things. And you know, I'll put some words here. I'll put the name of a very cool programming language in. Yeah, I got 8 points for it. So again, this is an experience that is built using HTML that is not constrained by needing to be kind of backwards or compatible or worry about if APIs are not available. This is what you can build when you build for a futuristic browser. And it's unlike anything that you've basically been using for the web to this point. But we're expecting to see a lot more of it. Finally, I've got WikiHow, which is just another really cool content website that's just skinned up and presented in such a really interesting way. So for example, I can learn if I want to survive an animal attack or avoid rattlesnake attacks, and it'll give me some info, it'll let me quiz myself, etc. So again, not an experience that you would kind of expect if you went to news.google.com. Okay, Arne, you jerk. This is all Chrome stuff. Stop talking about standards and then just showing Chrome stuff. What about the rest of the internet, you know? And this is a valid complaint, but I am from Google. I do work for the Chrome browser, so I mean, understandably, we're very proud of the feature set that we support. So when I'm up here and I'm talking to you about HTML5, I'm going to show you the APIs that we think we really do a good job on. But I do have 4 responses for people who are kind of maybe saying I'm not addressing everything equally. Well, there's the first, which is the what would you have me do response. Basically, I don't believe it's worth development time to kind of support legacy browsers. You know, I think we've gotten to the point where we can finally start killing them off for real and really not bothering to spend, you know, maybe 30% of our time for, you know, 5 to 10% of the browser market. The amount of work that I've done personally to make Internet Explorer 6 render stuff and fallback and do all that stuff is probably wasted time in my opinion now. And I really would rather use it spending to make these apps that I just showed you, the apps of that quality and that polish that run really well on browsers that have most of the feature support that I want. So that's one of my retorts. There's the we're big and we're getting better response. So you can actually see that Chrome itself has been on a kick and a very big tear lately. And I forget actually what the dates were that these corresponded with. So early in 2010, we announced 70 million. We announced 120 million just recently. So if you think about it, Facebook was 100 million users in 2008, and now they're at 500 million. So I mean, we're seeing a really nice kind of exponential-ish curve for Chrome. We expect to keep gaining market share. We're putting a lot of effort because we want people to use this browser. We want this in the hands of a lot of users. And 120 million users is nothing to scoff at. So if you can develop using these features and reach that kind of audience, I think it's worth it. And again, you can add in things like Mozilla and even IE9, realistically, to even bump up that total even more. There's also the use and escape patch response. So if you're not aware of it, we have a piece of software called Chrome Frame, which is a plugin for Internet Explorer. And if you decide to support Chrome Frame in your site, you can actually prompt the user to install this plugin. It is a plugin, admittedly, but we've kind of been evangelizing and trying to get a lot of big sites to use it so that a lot of people who still like their older browsers, don't want to switch, can still get the benefit experience by installing the plugin, which actually is a copy of Chrome without any of the Chrome on it. And it will render pages using the Chrome engine directly inside of Internet Explorer. So, so it's very easy. Once the user has the plugin installed, you can basically tell the browser to render it using the plugin by either of these two methods. There's a meta tag, and there's also a HTTP header. And if you serve your content with either of these and the user has Chrome Frame installed, then everything's golden. You basically have another Chrome user that will be viewing your content. Yeah, question? Yeah, the question was basically, would this allow users who maybe are handicapped or can't afford a newer computer to access content that's maybe designed for maybe a more modern browser? Yeah. And I believe that that is definitely something that this plugin will allow you to do. It basically takes the rendering engine from IE6 and replaces it with Chrome, which is faster in a lot of cases. In JavaScript terms, it's much faster. So even if you have older hardware, you actually could, I don't have specific metrics to quote you on this, but I would expect you to see a speed bump in terms of rendering pages or executing JavaScript-heavy applications. Yeah, especially if you're doing stuff for a school district. This is why we call it an escape hatch, because there's always audiences that you can't convince to upgrade. So if you have to develop for that kind of audience, this is our solution to that. And then finally, to bring things back onto my retorts against this imaginary straw man who is criticizing me, there's the brand new market response. And I have a picture here of a device that maybe you're all familiar with. It's a CR48. It is the test prototype device that we're distributing for Chrome OS. And so I know we had Chrome OS listed here on kind of the topic list for tonight. And I'm sad to say that it's a great device. It's fun to use, but there's nothing really special about it because you can go download a copy of Chrome and actually use a lot of the same functionality that you would use on a Chrome OS device. But the interesting thing about this is that we've seen a lot of adoption from enterprises, from school districts, for example. People who want kind of maybe a lower cost notebook, which I say lower cost because when you're only running a browser as your operating system, you don't need all the extra hardware and stuff that you might normally. So the costs can be lower. Also, the performance can be better for comparable hardware because you are basically stripping out most of the operating system stuff that sits between the browser and the hardware of the computer. So when you're running Chrome directly on hardware with minimal OS, between it, that basically means that stuff will run faster compared to a comparable machine. So we have these companies, these kind of organizations that are very interested in these machines because they're just a browser. There's very little you can do to infect it with spyware, for example, or do anything like that. We believe it's the most secure operating system that's ever been written. Is kind of the thing that we've been saying. So basically, we have this brand new market of users who will only be using Chrome as their operating system, and this is an attractive proposition for developers, I think, just because these people need apps. These people need the kinds of things that maybe they relied on for Windows, things like Notepad and stuff like that. So we've actually seen a lot of very popular apps inside of the Chrome Web Store have been stuff that replicate functionality for applications that maybe you were used to packaging with your OS. But now that it's available on the web, these applications can offer enhanced functionality like synchronizing online and things like that. So I'll kind of dive into a few specific notes on Chrome OS for the time being. Like I said, it's unsexy from a development point of view when you compare it to Chrome because it's basically Chrome. It has one new feature as far as I know. It has panels. So if you were to use window.open, the same JavaScript function that you would use to open a window on your browser, you can actually have it open up in a docking panel and then render content into that using the standard HTML stuff you would normally use. On Chrome, if you use window.open, it just opens up a new window. So that's one difference. And then the other difference is Chrome OS does not have support for native code. So you cannot use MP API, which is maybe a fallback that some extension developers for Chrome have been using. So MP API, if you're not familiar with, is a standard for browser plugins. Stuff like Flash is written using it, and you will be unable to write code which uses MP API for Chrome OS. We do have some solutions to kind of replace it. One of these is Native Client, which is an open source project. We've been bundling it with Chrome for a while now. And it lets you compile C code in a way that can be delivered over the internet, run cross-platform, and run with the speed of native code while still taking advantage of security sandbox that we have available for it. So basically, we're expecting folks to develop in that manner going forward and kind of trying to kill MP API while we can. And the great thing, like I mentioned before, is we're relying on the web to supply functionality. So as a developer, think about things that you use on your computer. There's no reason why you couldn't develop that on the internet for almost every application you could throw at me. I think people say Photoshop and 3D modeling, and I'll admit that maybe the performance isn't good enough yet for 48-bit color and all of that. But for the most part, almost every application would do fantastically with JavaScript on the web, and things like Native Client can make even more sophisticated applications viable. So I think that porting stuff is very easy, and kind of the converse of that is that instead of adding specific APIs into Chrome OS, we're actually just extending Chrome itself, so that not only will Chrome OS users get advantage of all this new web stuff, we're basically standardizing on stuff where we can, and we're delivering it to the Chrome browser itself where we can. So things like the Chrome apps that you would get out of the Chrome Web Store are installable on Chrome and the Chrome OS, because it wouldn't make sense just to have it on Chrome OS. We want to have every Chrome user kind of have similar experiences. So basically, that's about it for right now. If you guys have questions about it, you can ask me at the end, but I'll move back on to the browser itself. So just keep in mind that Chrome OS is basically Chrome for all intents and purposes, at least from this presentation's point of view. So let's talk about targeting smart browsers. So you have all these APIs. Now you have some inspiration to do some stuff, really get excited, build some really interesting applications, and kind of what can you do when you're targeting these modern browsers? Well, like I said, we want to create desktop quality applications. We want users to develop applications that they install into the browser and run and have functionality and are following those guidelines that I illustrated out before. We want developers, you guys, to be able to distribute and sell them on the web, right? So up until now, mostly the way that people will monetize is subscription-based websites or ad-based websites, something we do pretty well here at Google, but we want to open up a third model. And that is the idea that people will actually pay maybe one-time fixed costs to use a web application or pay a recurring micropayment subscription to use a web application. The motivation, so going for this kind of application environment, is that users need a way. If we we basically sat down and said, if we have this idea of apps and these sexy apps and these great apps, Google search is not going to cut it. Users need a way to determine what the good apps are, to rate them, rank them, and kind of get metrics and insight on what makes a good app. So we needed some way for users to filter out high-quality apps versus just normal apps that might come up through searching. And then finally, or secondarily, we said developers need distribution. So developers need to be able to package up their apps, put it in one place, and be able to reach a wide user base without really much fuss or listing in several search engines or that kind of thing. And they also need monetization. So they need to be able to take their apps and get some sort of easy way to make money off of it without having to roll their own payment solution or anything. And if it hasn't been apparent to you, what I've kind of been rambling on about is I've been talking about the Chrome Web Store. This is what we came up with. So we have all these great, sexy apps, and we wanted to deliver a place for users to sell them and for users of those apps to kind of find them and install them. And this is our online web front that we've come up with. You can actually see the URL is chrome.google.com/webstore. If you go there right now in your Chrome browser, you'll have a wealth of applications that you can install and start using right away. We also have some client integration. So on your new tab page, if you're using Chrome, you've probably already seen it, but we have giant big icons that are beautiful, that kind of really give a nice launchery feel to the new tab page. And these are how you interact with the apps. Like you saw me launch a few of them earlier. And we've actually had pretty good press. I mean, it's not all been uniformly great, but we've had some really shining gems of praise. For example, PC World did a really nice article about our launch. TweetDeck's been the runaway success ever since we launched, so they just get tons of installs every day. They have a really fantastic HTML5 app. If you use TweetDeck on the desktop, I would suggest trying out the Chrome Web Store version of it. It's almost, I'd say it's as good, if not better, because there's nothing to install. You just go to the app and it runs. Finally, New York Times. People are finding a lot of inspiration, a lot of use out of the web store so far. And I'll get into a little bit more specifics later on. One interesting point about the web store itself is that all web apps are welcome. So no matter what you're kind of working on, we're going to host it. We're not going to have draconian review process before you upload your app. We do have terms and conditions, so you do have to follow the terms of service. So there's certain categories of apps which we have to take down. But for the most part, we're not doing content review. We're not trying to police your stuff. So I gave you some suggestions, some strong suggestions on ways that you can make your app engaging and exciting for users. But at the same time, do whatever you want, right? It's the web. It's not under the control of one company. What we can offer you when you do host in the web store is payments, an API for payments, which is based off of checkout. So for example, you'll be able to list your application for a certain price or for a recurring subscription. And we're actually working on in-app payments itself too. So users of your app will be able to maybe buy items inside of it, and so on. We have OpenID single sign-on. So users of the store who actually go in and buy an app or click install on an app will actually be forwarded to your application with OpenID credentials. So if you take advantage of it, if you kind of accept this API, then you can actually get single sign-on, basically, functionality between the Chrome Web Store and the app itself, which is tied to the user's Google account. We have a license server, so if you do opt into payments, especially subscription-based payments or free trial payments, you can actually query the license server, again using that OpenID single sign-on system, and find out whether the user's has paid for the app and offer them a different experience if they have or have not. And basically, now let's kind of go on to the two different types of apps that we offer in the store. So we have hosted web apps, and these are the ones that you know and love because these are standard web pages, basically. They're hosted on a server, and basically they take advantage of HTML5. You do have to spend some money to host them, to let them run in the background. But it's the web experience of development using maybe PHP, Python, anything in the background that you want, use a database, that kind of thing. We also do have packaged web apps, which are kind of a new flavor of application and something that we're pushing as well. And this is the idea that you don't need a server component to an application for a modern web app. Like I showed you, there's a file system now available for applications. Applications can do things like manipulate images, manipulate files directly using JavaScript. So if you get rid of the server requirement, then the app can actually be downloaded directly onto the browser, can actually run offline, and do all its stuff without really needing to rely on a server. It can still rely on a server if it wants to, but at the same time, it's an interesting piece of functionality that can run locally on the machine. It's very easy to create an app. So again, my apologies for the colors on this. I didn't really realize how bad the projector would make it look. But it's a very simple JSON structure. Basically, you put in some metadata about your application. You put in some URLs that constitute the range of your app, so places that you can navigate. And then launch URL, which is basically a URL that gets opened when you click the app icon itself. And then finally, we get to an interesting bit at the bottom, which is a permission section. So apps actually do have a few permissions for things that are not currently possible by regular web pages. And mostly, these are just extensions to the standard set of APIs that you would get if you were a normal web developer. For example, we have unlimited storage. So if you were writing an app that used local storage or used that file system, normally you would be limited by the browser for a certain amount of disk space. Well, what we said for apps is now you can use unlimited if you request this permission. We also have things like notifications. You might have noticed that before I had a geolocation prompt come up on my browser, you can request a permission for geolocation. You can take care of all this up front in your app manifest so that the user agrees to these in bulk when they install the app. And then you don't have to ask for it again. You just have blanket access to this stuff. So the user doesn't always get that yellow bar at the top of their browser whenever they're using your application. And then finally, something that's really interesting that we just kind of made public a few days ago was the idea of background apps. And if you haven't really been following along with the developments on Chrome, I think it's one of the coolest technologies that we have. It's the idea that you can actually specify a page that gets loaded in the background invisibly by the browser and just sits there and runs. So even if, for example, if Gmail were to implement this background page, even if I had Gmail closed, they could open up a lightweight, minimal page that's invisible to the user just to check for new mail. And if they found new mail, they could do things like pop up a desktop notification, like you can maybe see in the last permission here. It's kind of just a floating window that's not attached to the browser, just to alert the user that there might be something interesting to do. They could play a sound. They could perform a network access, whatever, all without the user needing to even have Gmail open in one of their browser windows. So this makes an app, web app, act more like a desktop app in a very significant way. And I'm really hoping that people kind of take that and run with it and make some really interesting stuff. Kind of sits there in the background and just processes data, does some interesting notification stuff. So very quickly, the Chrome Web Store, we tried to make as easy as possible to publish an app. So I won't get too far into the details here, but you basically just need to create an awesome web app. So again, I showed you a bunch of great APIs, showed you some guidelines in terms of what we're looking for when we're looking for like apps that are really shining examples of everything. And you build it. And number one is obviously going to take the longest and be the hardest, but once you're done, the rest are fairly easy. So you just create that manifest file that I just went over, you make some icons for it, and maybe some image assets for the Chrome Web Store. You zip it all up, and then you upload it to the Chrome Web Store dashboard. And this is kind of just a place where you can just submit apps and manage them and find out, or set up their metadata. You configure your listing. You pay a one-time $5 fee. I'm not trying to gloss over this. There is a $5 fee. We try to verify that developers are real people, so we just charge them a token amount. And then you verify any domains that your app runs on, in the case that it's a hosted app, with Google's existing webmaster tools, which you might have done already if you were, for example, I think analytics might require that, and a few other APIs might require that as well. Finally, you just hit publish, and then you're listed in the store. There's no review process or anything like that. You can be live on the same day that you upload. OK, so I have a short video, but I feel like maybe we don't need to watch it because things started late. So basically, just trust me. It walks me through the same steps that we did last time. But if you really want an easy kind of to play around with stuff, maybe put up your blog online, I would suggest going to appmater.appspot.com. And what this is a nice little utility that one of our team members wrote. And what you would do is type in your normal website, and it would give you a icon that you can drag onto your desktop. So it uses some of these file APIs that HTML5 offers. And it will give you that package that you can upload to the Chrome Web Store. So you basically type in the domain, add in a little bit of metadata, upload an icon, and then drag out the zip package. So we try to make it as easy as possible to package up your app if you want to get listed right away. Sorry. I'll talk about some of the best practices. Just in terms of, you might be asking, basically, OK, I have this app uploaded. Doesn't the Chrome Web Store suffer from the same disadvantage that all of these app stores and stores do? Is that initially, yes, they get a big traffic bump and whatever, but eventually there's so many apps that it's hard to discover. And we recognize that, and we're working on a variety of systems to highlight apps, especially because we know that we're going to scale past a certain size. But at the same time, what you can do to make yourself stand out is follow some of these best practices, these principles that we believe make a really great app, and then we can help you out. You know, we want to help developers. We want to get developers kind of successful and built up in the store. So if you have a really great app and you follow some of these, we will definitely work with you to get you highlighted, get you promotion, that kind of thing. So we're actively engaged both in receiving apps and also trying to help promote apps inside of the store. So the first would be use analytics. Analytics as a standard website tool is fantastic. Google Analytics, if you're not aware of it. Basically, it will give you metrics about how users are engaging with your app and what are they doing. We want people to use this because even though you think that your app design might be great, you might actually be surprised by what analytics will tell you. It might tell you that users are not using a certain feature on your site. They're totally ignoring content that you're putting somewhere. They're not clicking on certain links and so on. And so when you get these metrics, you can actually start tweaking things and optimizing your experience. So basically, you want a feedback loop. I suggest using analytics. Or rolling your own even if you don't want to use Google stuff. We want to make sure that apps have easy feedback for users. So another thing, you want to be engaged with your user audience. These are new experiences. Many of them will be used to using regular websites. So you want to basically guide them through the process of using your app and also get suggestions and feedback from the users when they've been using your app. So for example, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Gawker's kind of redesign recently, yeah, like that train wreck. I think it's actually kind of an interesting. I've been using it for a few days, and I've kind of gotten used to it, and I like it. Like it's grown on me. But at the same time, it was a big shock because it was a completely different experience from what I was expecting. So I think this kind of thing of having feedback and acting on feedback and acting on analytics is very important. We're kind of in this nascent baby stage of this modern app internet, and we really want to kind of guide people through as opposed to just shocking them with radical designs. We do want to use all the accessibility and semantic features available in HTML5 because this stuff was put in there. A lot of people worked very hard on implementing these features, and so using things like ARIA should not be like kind of frosting on like maybe an afterthought on your app. Like there's stuff in there that will help you reach as many users as possible. We want to make the web kind of work equally for everybody, or as much so as possible at least. So I would, you know, my impassioned plea is to use ARIA and other accessibility features. In terms of just making your app more attractive inside of the store itself, if you charge for it, offer a free trial. A lot of people don't offer a free trial, and then what we're seeing is that users are actually kind of put off by the sticker shock of maybe paying a few dollars, right? If you guys are fans of the Oatmeal comic, I really should have put it on there. There's a great comic about some guy basically shelling out thousands of dollars for a computer or like $15 for a movie popcorn and ticket. And then he gets faced with the idea of paying $2 for an app, and he just goes into sticker shock and wants to call his accountant. And basically, that's what we're seeing. People are not used to paying upfront for websites. Why don't you let them use the site, use your app first, and then kind of encourage them to upgrade through incentives like additional functionality, better content, etc. Single sign-on also is, a lot of people seem to be stuck with other different types of logon systems, usually stuff that they've rolled themselves, rolled their own registration systems. So there's nothing that stings quite as much to me as when I install an app from the store, and then the first thing I get is a registration page. Because I've already gone through the store, right? I'm already logged in. I may have even paid for the app, but you want me to log in on your site too. We have a single sign-on solution. It's OpenID. It's not proprietary. It's a good standard to support. I would suggest supporting that. At least give me an option if you want to keep your own system. In that kind of vein, I also want to put out a plea for have good user onboarding, right? Walk them through the process of using your application. Don't just bombard them with a form to fill out all their personal information. Ask them for their email when you finally need their email, that kind of thing. Just kind of let them use as much of the app as possible with as minimal information as possible. Things like Etherpad, if you sadly were bought by Google, rolled into Wave, and then killed by Wave. But like Etherpad had a great sign-on, had a great startup kind of experience because you didn't need to be logged in to use it. You just went to that page, you started typing, and then when you wanted to save something, that's when you started kind of registering accounts and putting in information and passwords. So think about these flows, right? Like you don't need to have this monolithic registration form on your site, at least until you actually need it. There's the big screen UI. I see a lot of apps that are kind of either repackaged mobile apps or you know, like little tiny Flash movies. And honestly, I don't have anything wrong with hosting a, there's nothing wrong with hosting a Flash movie in the site, but take advantage of the fact that Flash can kind of be dynamic and be full screen and everything. We want to let people take advantage, we want take advantage of their big screens. Like I said, this laptop, maybe a tablet, maybe my 30-inch monitor, you know, just kind of reflow the entire UI to make the application work the way that they want it to. So media queries are great for this. You can actually use CSS. CSS3 has expanded support for media queries, which will let you actually specify ranges of widths and heights, and then whole big chunks of styles that you can do. So you can actually do a UI that will reflow, hide components, show more information if it has more area, and show less information if it has a smaller area. And just really kind of think about the difference between, you know, if someone's viewing your site with a small view and a large view, because it will happen. It is the web. You're not fixed onto one display that has a set DPI or set resolution. So media queries use all the screen, expand, use flexible layouts, that kind of thing. In-app navigation is kind of part of this too, right? Your app itself should have a lot of controls. You shouldn't have to rely on the browser's back buttons and so on. It should be obvious that the user wants to click somewhere to go somewhere and do something. So just have a sensible navigation inside of your app. This doesn't apply to every application, but it is a good design principle to follow. And again, if we're going to crib from the best and think about the way you know, like mobile apps work, right? A lot of them have that bar with like the contextual buttons that you can press to get around, jump to different parts of the app itself. And then finally, get your app noticed. There are no silver bullets for making it successful. So you have great features, you can build great apps, and nobody could use it if you don't do any promotion yourself. So we will work with you if you list an app and you kind of contact us and talk about it. But at the same time, we think that you should go out there, hit the pavement, kind of work hard, and you know, do promotion, buy ads. You know, try to get written up in tech magazines or tech websites, blogs, that kind of thing. There's plenty of people who are looking for to highlight apps as part of a App of the Week kind of blog post and that kind of thing. There's all these opportunities, and people just kind of let them go by. So try to be, you know, out there and engaged, and it does pay off. It does reward you. Oh, I lied. So I said finally, but finally should be fast. So again, like I said, Google search managed to shave off a few hundred milliseconds, or we did some experiments where we slowed down the page artificially, and we actually lost a significant percentage of usage. So fast really matters, and people don't really realize it. I think you might think that a couple second load time is okay, but when you cut it down to under a second, it's amazing how much more responsive and like engaging the app feels, even just kind of using it day to day. So do things like store data locally, process data in the background. There's an API called Web Workers, which I didn't really mention, but is available on html5rocks.com. More information is, at least. You can minimize connections to the server, and you can decrease bandwidth, you know, cache stuff. Take advantage of just standard HTML, HTTP caching. We do have tools inside of Chrome. So for example, here's an audit panel inside of the developer tools. If you're not using it, you should. Basically, if you're familiar with Firefox, there's a great extension called YSlow. There's a few more, but This is kind of Chrome's version of it. Use something, use one of them, and it will give you a list of items that are maybe warning flags or errors about how you're actually just serving and structuring your content that's slowing it down. So performance matters. We have tools. People don't use them a lot. But don't take my word for it. We do have some third-party testimonials. I'm going to toot my own horn here for a little bit. We have Todoly, basically saying that ever since they got listed in the App Store, their user base increased by 780%. So in the first 3 weeks of being listed, they had basically satisfied their goals for their first 1.5 years. It's great for small startups like this. You know, the Chrome Web Store, you know, people are admittedly like kind of hesitant to buy stuff, but we're finding it great for exposure. If you have a really polished, good app, and you're getting a lot of users and getting a lot of reviews, that just kind of snowballs. And you, again, you're probably not even seeing this curve, but it's like this great bump of their traffic ever since they got launched. So they blogged about it, and we're really flattered that they had this great experience with it. SlideRocket, another app, kind of like startup-y kind of app that got launched or listed in the Chrome Web Store. They got 50,000 installs in the first 10 days. So we do see millions of people hitting the Chrome Web Store. There is that kind of exposure for applications, especially if you're in a small startup. You can afford to be a little bit nimble, kind of respond to stuff that might come up, and really just try to get your app listed in here. So they said that 60% of their daily leads are coming from the Chrome Web Store. It means that people who are going there are still eventually more likely to buy something than you know, someone who's just an organic kind of coming in off the street, for example. And they do kind of say that our revenue share is favorable. So I don't really get involved with this too much, but to me, 5% is, you know, lower than you see in a lot of places, and we think that's very fair considering you know, the exposure that we're able to give you. And that's about it. Thanks again. And then Lucidchart. So they got about 30,000 users, and keep in mind we've only been launched for a few months now. They've basically just found, again, like I'm saying, that the traffic growth that we're seeing out of the Chrome Web Store is very impressive. So again, we want to work with these kinds of partners. These weren't really specifically partners that we were hand-holding through this process. These are people who found organic success inside of the store. And so we're really impressed when we're seeing these kinds of stories. We want to see more of them. We want to see people in San Francisco, New York, all over, kind of indie developers, small companies, launch their stuff on Chrome Web Store and just deliver some experiences that will revolutionize the way that people are using their browser. So to wrap up, we want to target smart browsers. We want web apps that are built using HTML5 technologies. They don't have to be. We just think that the experience is better when you take advantage of the modern stuff. And when you do target smart browsers, you can actually use this functionality fairly reliably and not have to worry that whether users have it or not. For folks who may not have this functionality, there's either shims that you can find online that replicate it, so maybe fallbacks to Flash for things like movies where there's no native media support, or things like, there's all sorts of shims that you can find online. And then finally, we want these apps to be distributed in the Chrome Web Store. Now, we're not saying that you have to be exclusively distributed. A lot of these are web apps that run and work like perfectly fine in Mozilla, which is a great browser. If people are using Mozilla, I'm happy too. So I think that basically we want the web to just change fundamentally. We want it to be more engaging. We want people to realize success and engagement on it. So that's my plea to you. It's very heavily biased. My name is Arne. Here's some resources. Basically, you just need to google.com/Chrome /apps/webstore/ChromeFrame. You'll find it, code.google.com. And then some interesting HTML5 stuff. If you go to html5rocks.com, again, I'm not impartial here. This is a site that my team works on. html5rocks.com will point you towards all these other resources. And there's one more thing. So I did say I would stop talking about Chrome OS, but if you stick around for the raffle at the end, I've got 3 of them that I can give out. So hopefully we'll have 3 of you guys kind of go home with some CR48s and you know, maybe start developing some apps with it, please. It'd be fun. Yeah, so the question was, when do I think there will be a Google Maps that will behave in 3D like the Android version? Honestly, I don't know. Like, I have no insight into that team, so your guess is as good as mine. I think the teams at Google are very excited about HTML5, but understandably, they've been, just like every other company who's been invested in the web, like this stuff has crept up very fast. So I think it takes some learning, it takes some training, and we're working on it. We think we're the best at the web, as a company. So I hope that we'll get it fast. There's nothing stopping us at this point. The technology is there, yeah. Like I said, WebGL can do 3D rendering, or you can even do some stuff in Canvas, for example, or SVG to mimic 3D. And if you are interested, there's a great library called 3.js, which is like amazing 3D graphics stuff. Great. So the question was, how does the Chrome Web Store play into Google Web Toolkit or App Engine or anything that we offer at Google? And this is great because we've been working on web-based APIs and web-based technologies for a while now. And the Chrome Web Store is relatively new, and we really think that it works really well with all of it. So App Engine, personally, I find to be a great option for hosting, like a hosted app, for example, just because it scales out to a lot of users, very easy to develop for, and they have certain types of APIs that make it attractive. In terms of GWT, we've seen people develop websites with GWT. Like I showed you that Canvas demo that showed all the performing kind of. Yeah, the Canvas stuff is new in the newest version of GWT. So we think that that's a great solution because it lets you use Java, which is considered like maybe not a web-based language or like high-performance graphics language, or like not the kind of language you would write that kind of stuff in to write Canvas-based HTML5 apps. So it's pretty cool. So the question is, when do I think that we'll be able to sell extensions to the web store? This is unfortunately something that we promised. We want to sell extensions as well. We still fully intend to deliver that. There are certain things that are keeping us from being able to do that from a technical point of view. So I can't really give you a specific timeline. I think we're looking on launching the Chrome Web Store internationally first, and then extensions should be pretty fast. IndexedDB, do I have a timetable for that? The question of IndexedDB, for anyone who's not familiar with it, is it's another storage API that's available in Chrome today. I believe it's behind a flag, right, on dev channel. I might be mistaken. But basically, we had the SQL database that was available on the web. There was some pushback against standardizing SQL as part of the web standard. So some folks came up with an alternative proposal called IndexedDB. We've implemented it kind of on the dev channel and so on. We're working on it. It's hard to say because the spec is very amorphous, I think, still. I think we feel like we have a good implementation. It's available. It's just not unstable yet, I feel. I don't really know. Sorry. So the question was, there was no talk about mobile. And I can approach this two ways, right? I can either say that mobile app browsers are really amazing because a lot of these features are actually in these mobile app browsers. You can look at the Gmail view in maybe like the iPhone or an Android, and it's really good. It actually uses application cache, which is a way to store assets offline. It uses SQL databases so that it can actually store metadata about messages so you don't have to be online. So it kind of syncs and does all this stuff. It uses CSS3 to kind of do drop shadows and rounded corners and hover effects. And mobile's a great platform for HTML. I didn't get to it just because you guys are here late enough already. An apps section for mobile apps. We haven't really talked about it so much publicly. Basically, we're trying to launch the Chrome Web Store as a desktop kind of notebook, tablet experience. Stuff with Chrome on it. A common misconception is actually that the Android browser is Chrome, but it's really not. It's a different browser. It's based off of WebKit, so they have the same roots. But at the same time, it's not Chrome. So we're really worrying about Chrome, and then we can branch out to other browsers and other experiences going on. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't design your application to work on a mobile browser. We're seeing some really great shims that work as mobile apps, and it's a good cross-platform way to kind of deliver the same sort of experience with minimal amount of work porting between them. Yeah, the question was about our international rollout, and it is still coming. This week we did announce that developers can upload now and start picking their pricing, I believe, for the countries that we'll be rolling out to first. So we're in the middle of it. We're expecting it to happen very soon. So if you're a developer of an app, you can actually go and upload and start preparing, start thinking about what you're going to charge. We do have a set pricing tiers. So they're set for each country, so you'll have to decide how you want to price. But yeah, unfortunately, we're not currently launched, but we expect to be soon. Yeah, basically, the stuff that's stopping us from rolling out to as many countries as possible is less on the technical side, but more compliance issues. If you have a web store and you're selling things in a country, then there's all sorts of requirements that you have to go through. So we're doing it as fast as we can, but it does take some time. Faster to write the code than to go through all the hurdles. So the question was, given what we've learned with the CR48, where do we see it? Like, how does it fit into things? I think one of the major learnings that we were very surprised about was it's big in business. We were thinking it would be kind of a disposable consumer device. Not disposable, but you've seen the video maybe where we've destroyed a bunch of them, like by pouring ice cream on it and so on. So we were thinking that this experience would be fantastic for end users, but it turns out that IT admins, would have a field day with this because it no longer means provisioning machines and doing all that. It means that if someone manages to goof up their work machine, they can just hand them a new machine and not do anything about it, right? They can just log in. All the stuff gets synced, it gets pulled down. Whatever apps they were using are on the internet, so the data is still there. So I think we underestimated how attractive that would be to businesses. I think that's a big one. I think we're still targeting, basically like lifestyle notebook computers, right? Like what you do on your browser most of the time is checking email, doing Google searches, reading blogs, interacting with apps, is a small bit of it. We're hoping that will grow, but at the same time, we think it's uniquely suited for that in the sense that it's kind of like this little companion that you have with you. Like I use mine on my couch when I'm like watching TV. And a lot of people say that about phones and iPads and everything. I just find it nice, using a keyboard and kind of just looking stuff up while I'm paying half attention, maybe. Yeah, that's a great point. That if you lose the machine, nothing's really stored on the machine. I mean, it reduces risk. Yeah. Do we feel inspired by the WebOS technologies?
Any particular ones you feel inspired?
Any particular ones? I do. It's hard to speak for the entire Chrome team, right? As a kind of a product, I mean, I do admire WebOS because as far as I understand, their interface was all done in HTML. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you have Canvas, right? So
Yeah. So I think that's really amazing. Like if you really look at WebOS, it looks like a polished, modern operating system. It's really flashy. Has a kind of a lot of effects and transitions, and the fact that they're building that using JavaScript is really something I find inspiring. I can't speak for everyone else, but I think that's what Chrome's kind of mission goal is, right? If we could make the entire web look that good, then why not?